My name is David, and for the past 7 years I was married to a woman named Rebecca. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you I had a decent marriage. Not perfect, but solid enough. Turns out I was dead wrong. Rebecca was planning to leave me, thinking she'd walk away with everything she wanted. But what she didn't know was that I was already 10 steps ahead. I'll admit, things weren't always bad. When we first got together, she was sweet, attentive even. Back then, I felt like she actually cared about me, like I was her person. But over time, something changed. At first, it was subtle. A shift in the way she spoke to me, the way she looked at me, like I was an inconvenience rather than a partner. I brushed it off. People change, right? Relationships go through phases. But then the comments started. You should really dress better, like Michael in accounting. He always looks put together. You ever think about going to the gym? You know, just to be healthier? I wish we traveled more. Claire's husband took her to Greece last summer. Must be nice. It was always someone else. Someone taller, richer, more successful, more ambitious. It didn't matter what I did, I was never enough. At first, I tried harder. I worked late to earn more, only to hear, "You're never home." I came home early, and it was, "Don't you have any drive?" I bought her gifts, and she called them a waste of money. I didn't, and I was neglecting her. There was no winning. And the only reason I didn't walk away sooner, our son. I wasn't about to let my boy grow up in a broken home if I could help it. So I stayed. I put up with the coldness, the resentment, the condescending looks. But then something happened that made me realize just how deep I was in. It was a normal Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner while my son sat at the counter, drawing. Out of nowhere, he said, "Dad, can I ask you something?" I glanced over. "Of course, buddy. What's up?" "Who's Uncle Ryan?" The plate in my hand nearly slipped. I forced myself to stay calm. "Uncle Ryan?" I repeated. "Who's that?" "Mommy's friend. He takes us to the park when you're at work. He says he used to play football like me." I felt my heart slow, like everything inside me had just turned to ice. My son had no reason to lie. Kids don't make up details like that. I swallowed, hard. "Oh, yeah? What else does Uncle Ryan do?" He shrugged, still focused on his drawing. "He picks us up sometimes. He bought Mom flowers last week, but she said we had to hide them before you got home." I don't remember much after that. I think I mumbled something about bedtime and went to take a shower just so I could be alone for a minute. Rebecca had a man in our lives, our son's life, and she was bold enough to let him take my kid places. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't explode. Instead, I started watching, paying attention. And suddenly, everything I had ignored or excused before came into focus. Rebecca had been running errands a lot more than usual. Gym sessions that took 4 hours, grocery runs that somehow took all night, friends she never mentioned before, and then there was her phone, always on silent, always face down. If it rang, she'd step out of the room before answering. The few times I happened to glance over, she was swiping messages away so fast it was obvious she didn't want me to see. I had my answer, but knowing wasn't enough. I needed proof. Texas is a fault-based divorce state, meaning, if I could prove her infidelity, she wouldn't just lose her claim to alimony, she could end up paying me. That changed everything. Instead of confronting her, I played along. I stopped asking questions. I stopped noticing when she came home late. And in the meantime, I hired a private investigator. It took 3 weeks before I had everything I needed. Photos, videos, timestamps. And the worst part? She wasn't just sneaking around, she was bringing him into our home. That was it for me. I didn't just want to leave. I wanted to make sure she didn't take anything from me when I did. The first thing I did was lock down my finances. I moved my savings into accounts under my son's name. College funds, inheritance trusts. Legally structured so she couldn't touch them. I transferred my stocks. Changed the ownership of my business to a trust. On paper, I had nothing. Next, I prepared for custody. I started keeping track of how often she left our son alone. writing down every night she had plans. I took pictures of empty wine bottles piling up in the kitchen, screenshots of texts she sent when she thought I was asleep. I built my case piece by piece, and then, finally, I waited. I knew Rebecca would try to play her hand eventually. And sure enough, one night, she did. We were in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, when she sighed dramatically and said, "I think we should separate." She expected me to argue, to panic, maybe even beg. Instead, I leaned back, took a sip of my drink, and said, "All right." She blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." She had no idea that I had already seen the text she sent Ryan that morning. "It's finally happening. He won't see it coming." Except I did. The next morning, before she even had a chance to start dividing up our assets, my lawyer sent her the divorce papers. The look on her face when she opened them, worth every second of planning, because she thought she was playing me. Turns out, she was playing herself. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, her robe still wrapped tightly around her, staring at the divorce, papers like they were written in a foreign language. I took a sip of my coffee, acting like I wasn't watching her, but I saw it. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. "You already hired a lawyer?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Of course," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You wanted a separation? I'm just making it easier for both of us." She forced a smile. "David, we don't have to make this ugly. We can do this amicably, split things fairly." Fairly. I almost laughed. What she really meant was that she expected to walk away with half of everything, the house, the savings, maybe even alimony if she played her cards right. But she had no idea that her hand had already been played. "You're right," I said, setting my mug down. "We should keep this simple. That's why I included everything in the papers. It's all there. Full custody of our son, financial, arrangements, and—" I let my voice trail off, enjoying the way her face paled. "And what?" she pressed. I met her eyes. "And the evidence of your affair." Her mouth opened, then shut. A slow shake of her head. "What? What are you talking about?" I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Photos, videos, screenshots of your messages with Ryan. The investigator did a thorough job." She didn't reach for it. She didn't have to. She already knew what was inside. David, I can explain." "No need." I leaned back. "The court will understand everything just fine." Her breathing quickened. She flipped through the papers again like she was searching for something, and then realization hit. "You're cutting me off," she whispered. I shrugged. "It's all in the paperwork. No alimony, no claims on the assets. And since Texas is a fault-based divorce state, you may even have to pay me damages." But I'm his mother," she stammered. "You can't take my son from me." I tilted my head. "Can't I?" I let that hang in the air. For the first time, true fear flickered in her eyes. "You've been neglecting him, Rebecca." "The PI got more than just pictures of you and Ryan. There are records of the nights you left him alone, witness statements, even texts from your own friends where you admitted you needed space from being a mom." I sighed. "A judge isn't going to like that." She pressed her lips together, shaking her head. "You set me up." "No," I corrected. "You did this to yourself. I just paid attention." Her hands clenched into fists. "David, please. Let's talk about this." I grabbed my keys and stood up. "My lawyer will be in touch." And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her sitting there in silence. I'd like to say she accepted her defeat gracefully, that she signed the papers and moved on, but of course she didn't. Rebecca wasn't just angry, she was humiliated. And when people like her feel backed into a corner, they lash out. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything. She started with manipulation. "David, think about our son. He needs both of us. We can work this out." Then came guilt. "I made a mistake, okay? But we've had so many good years together. Doesn't that count for anything?" And when that didn't work, the lies started. She told our mutual friends that I was controlling, that I was cutting her off to punish her. She spun the narrative so well that I actually had a few people reach out, asking if I was being too harsh. I didn't engage, didn't argue, because I didn't need to. The truth was already working in my favor. Rebecca thought she could manipulate the situation, but she had underestimated just how prepared I was. I had built my case meticulously. The financial transfers were airtight. The custody arguments were undeniable. And when the day came for our first court hearing, I was more than ready. Rebecca walked into that courtroom with a fake confidence. She had dolled herself up, dressed like she was the perfect mother fighting for her child. She smiled at the judge, spoke sweetly about wanting what's best for our son. Then my lawyer presented the evidence, the photos of her sneaking around with Ryan, the documented neglect of our child, the screenshots of her admitting to her own friends that she felt suffocated by being a parent. And then, the final blow, the prescription. See, I had found a small orange bottle in her purse weeks ago, a prescription for a certain medication used to treat sexually transmitted infections, a prescription that I had never needed. The moment my lawyer presented that, I watched Rebecca's face go from confident to blank to horrified. The judge looked at her with pure disapproval. It was over. The final ruling? Full custody to me. No alimony, no financial claims, and because she was found at fault for the divorce, she was even ordered to pay damages. Rebecca walked out of that courtroom looking like she had lost everything. Because she had. I'd love to say that after the court ruling, Rebecca disappeared from my life, and I never had to deal with her again. But life isn't that simple. She tried to appeal the decision, dragged out the process for months, claimed she was working on herself, going to therapy, and just needed another chance to prove she was a good mother. But the evidence was stacked too high against her, and the judge wasn't buying any of it. With each failed attempt, her desperation grew. And then one night, she pulled her final move, the one she thought would undo everything. It was late. Maybe close to midnight, when I heard a knock at my door. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Rebecca stood there, looking nothing like the confident, condescending woman who once thought she had everything figured out. Her hair was messy, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. She was holding a folder in her hands, gripping it so tight her knuckles were white. I didn't say anything as I opened the door, just crossed my arms and waited. "David," she breathed out like she was relieved I even answered. "Can I come in?" "No." She flinched, but she still stepped forward, lowering her voice like she was about to say something important. "I need to talk to you, please." I didn't move. "We're done talking, Rebecca." She swallowed, eyes darting around like she was making sure no one was watching. Then she lifted the folder. "I have something you need to see." I didn't trust her. Not even a little. But curiosity won. I took the folder, flipped it open, and everything inside me went cold. They were photos. Of me. Pictures taken over the last several months. Some of me picking up my son from school. Some of me at work. Some of me just out at the grocery store, going about my life. I looked back up at her. "What the hell is this?" Her lips parted into the smallest, most pathetic smile. Insurance. And just like that, I knew. She wasn't just trying to win back custody. She was trying to scare me. "You had me followed?" I asked, voice low. She shrugged like it was nothing. "You played dirty, David. I just returned the favor." I let out a slow breath, shutting the folder. "So what? You think this means something? Think you can use it against me?" "That depends," she said, tilting her head. "On how badly you want this all to go away." There it was. The real reason she was here. This wasn't about our son. This wasn't about trying to be a better mother or making amends. She wanted money. She thought I would be scared enough to give it to her. She thought wrong, I smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made her expression falter just a little. "You're really desperate, aren't you?" I said. "Lost everything, and now you're scrambling to get something back." Her jaw tightened. "I don't want to fight. Anymore, David. You just want a payout, I interrupted, because you can't stand the idea of being left with nothing. I took a step closer. You're broke. You have no job. No way to pay off those debts I found out about. I shook my head. And now, you think you can shake me down? Her eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe. I held up a hand. Save it. Then I pulled out my phone. You know, Rebecca, you're not the only one who knows how to play dirty. You thought you were the only one with surprises? I unlocked the screen, tapped a few times, and then turned it to face her. It was a video, and it was her, sitting across from her lawyer discussing the very plan she had just tried to pull on me. Her face turned ghost white. What? I let the video play for a few seconds before stopping it. You got sloppy, Rebecca. The same investigator who caught you cheating. He's been keeping an eye on you ever since. She took a shaky step back. You thought you could trap me? I asked, tucking my phone back in my pocket. You thought you had the upper hand? Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no words. I leaned in just enough to make sure she saw. The amusement in my face. Checkmate. She didn't say another word, just turned and practically ran down the steps, disappearing into the night. I never saw her again. The next morning, I sent everything to my lawyer. The photos she had taken, the blackmail attempt, the video of her admitting to it all. And then, I made sure the judge saw it. Rebecca was already on thin ice. But this was the final straw. Her last shred of credibility disappeared overnight. She was banned from any custody appeals, ordered to stay away from me. And when the dust settled, she had nothing left. No money, no house. No son. She moved out of state not long after that. Maybe she thought she could start fresh somewhere else, find another guy to sink her claws into. I didn't care, because for the first time in years, I was free. Free from the lies, free from the manipulation, free to finally build the life I wanted with my son, without her shadow hanging over us. Some people think they can cheat, lie, and manipulate their way through life. Rebecca thought she was playing a game she could win. Turns out, she wasn't just playing me, she was playing herself, and she lost.